That leads me to what I like to call the Democrats' golden goose tax policy. There are a lot of fairy tales that liberal politicians believe in. They believe, for example, in man-made global warming. They believe that more healthcare spending will reduce the deficit. But there's one fable that they don't quite seem to be able to comprehend, and that's the story of the goose that laid the golden egg. Most of you probably remember it, but just allow me to recap for just a second. There was this couple that magically had this goose that every day laid for them one egg of solid gold. You'd think that would make them pretty happy that they had a solid gold egg they could sell every day, but like most of us, they decided they wanted a little bit more, and one day they got greedy and decided we're going to butcher the golden goose, and we think inside we're going to get a whole goose full of golden eggs. When they killed the goose and opened it up, they found out, surprise, surprise, it's just like every other goose in that it only has one egg inside. So now they only had one more egg and they had killed the golden goose. It is that same short-sighted thinking that we see from Democrat legislators at the state capitol over the last several years, when in order to balance the state's budget during a recession, they chose to institute more than $180 million in higher taxes on families and businesses in the state of Colorado, the very families and businesses whose success is necessary for our economy to rebound and to grow out of the deficit at the state capitol. When Republicans argued that raising taxes during a recession was counterproductive, Speaker of the House Terrence Carroll, a Denver Democrat, a minister and an attorney, that's a dangerous combination, had this to say, and he can say it a whole lot better than I can. We are asking big business to pay their fair share so that we don't have to keep balancing the budget on the backs of teachers, police officers, firefighters, senior citizens, and the neediest who depend on our safety net. It is only the GOP and their special interest cronies who have been complaining because we're rolling back corporate welfare and special interest tax loopholes. I'll let you chew on that for just a minute. You know, if sanctimony and economic illiteracy were money, the Speaker could buy his favorite professional sports franchise. Where does he think the $7.5 billion in the state's general fund comes from if it doesn't come from businesses, those special interests he was talking about? It comes from businesses who pay taxes when they make a profit, who employ workers who also pay taxes when they produce things, businesses who buy things and pay taxes on those when they buy things to increase their productivity, but they only wind up being successful enough to pay taxes if they produce something that people will willingly buy. Compare that to government, which last time I checked doesn't produce anything that people willingly buy, which is why we have to pay taxes and fees. Well, when the state has less money to spend because business receipts are down, businesses have less money to spend because business receipts are down. When business is booming, businesses pay more taxes, not because legislators did something smart or raise tax rates. They did it because they're making more money and the economy is growing. But when receipts are down, businesses have no choice but to tighten their belts, spend less money on payroll, less money on the infrastructure that produces goods and services. When government raises taxes in the middle of a recession, businesses have no choice but to cut those costs even further by reducing payroll, reducing the amount they spend on other investments that would have inevitably generated more tax revenue. It is a vicious cycle, and it is one that inevitably backfires on legislators who view their first job as protecting government. Speaker Carroll and so many of his colleagues seem to believe that Colorado is a government that supports an economy rather than an economy that supports a government. Perhaps if the Speaker and so many of his colleagues in the legislature on the Democrat side of the aisle had ever met a payroll, they would understand why these policies and this rhetoric is disastrous. But a lack of business experience is a serious problem among Democrat legislators. That's why they look at business as just another special interest. In the House of Representatives, 70% of Democrats come from a background that's either government or nonprofit, not from productive businesses. In the Senate, it's 57% that come from a government or a nonprofit background. That's why they look at business as just another special interest And by the way, that's assuming that every attorney in the state legislature is practicing in the private sector. I'm counting all the attorneys as private sector contributors. In this predicament, they worship at the altar of government, which is why they can't resist spending every dollar they have during good times rather than setting some aside for bad times. It's also why they've ignored pleas to budget cautiously, and it's why they've made promises to schools and to senior citizens that they just can't keep. Well, let me last just say a couple words about why we can't afford in Colorado to be fooled by another so-called business-friendly Democrat. We heard how Governor Ritter was going to be a business-friendly Democrat. In fact, when the Denver Post asked him, he looked at the bills, the 45 bills that Governor Owens vetoed in his last year when he was working with a Democrat legislature, and Governor Ritter said, you know what, I'll veto 35 of those bills if I'm elected governor. Do you know what Governor Ritter has vetoed in his first 3 years in the state legislature? Out of more than 1,400 bills in the first year, he vetoed 8. The second year, he vetoed 7. The third year, he vetoed 4. That's a rubber stamp rate of 98.7% of all the bills that come out of this Democrat legislature. Well, now John Hickenlooper wants us to believe that he, too, is a business-friendly Democrat. Our state chairman, Dick Wadhams, who's much more quick-witted than I am, says that we need to ask Hickenritter, as he calls him, to explain why there's a difference between him and Bill Ritter. Will he vowed to roll back Governor Ritter's property tax, or his vehicle fee increase, his policy on early release of violent criminals, his executive order to unionize state workers, to repeal state spending policies, his job-killing energy policy? Which of those policies of Governor Ritter will John Hickenlooper vow to overturn? Colorado has to insist on firm answers to those questions because, as my mama told me once, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And I'm here to tell you, after 4 years of a Democrat governor and 6 years of a Democrat legislature, Colorado can't afford to be fooled again. Thank you, Elbert County. We appreciate your hard work. Look forward to working with you for the next several months to take back Colorado.